Hello, TradingView community. Welcome to my new analysis about silver futures. And within my recent developments, I have spotted some really important things going on within the silver price. And I also spotted them within the data dashboard. And therefore, silver recently showed up with these really important bearish developments with bearish pressure to the downside, printing several bearish pressure developments to the downside, several bearish pullbacks to the downside after forming these major lower highs within this whole structure. And these are some really important developments that should not be underestimated for the silver price within the current dynamic. And besides that, within the recent times, these bearish pullbacks, this established bearish pressure within the silver futures is actually supported by the fact that the bonds market recently gone up exponentially to the upside, and bonds formed several higher highs within the structure and are actually within a really important uptrend. And the same holds true for the US Dollar Currency Index, for the DXI. And what this means for assets like silver is that such a developments within the bonds and DXI are actually indicating that more bearish pressure is likely to set up within the actual silver futures market. And this is really important to put into the perspective here, because if bonds should rise further, and if the DXI should rise further and print several higher highs within the next times, this means that the bearish pressure developments, that's bearish pressure indication for silver futures, is likely to rise to new occasions. And this means that there's a higher likelihood possibility for a bearish continuation from the fundamental perspectives. Also, the PPI, the producer price index, recently increased massively for July. And this means that there's the Fed policy within the room that they are going to raise the interest rates and move on with a hawkish policy. And this could also put pressure on the main silver futures. And when looking at this whole dynamic here on the 2-day time frame perspective, the silver futures have continued to form these main pullbacks within these whole structures, always forming several lower highs within the whole structure, and from there on pulling back bearishly to the downside, showing up with bearish pressure and a increase of bearish dynamic to the downside. And this is actually a majorly established bearish downtrend, which established here. And within this main descending trend line, there's a major resistance that silver futures actually already confirmed several times. Now, when looking at this current market dynamic, the silver futures is also forming this main ascending trend line within this whole structure. And this ascending trend line has been penetrated already several times. That means that the more often this main ascending trend line is penetrated, the higher the possibility that with a final breakdown below this trend line, there's a higher possibility for a continued bearish momentum into the lower directions. And as this ascending trend line is now penetrated a fourth time again, there's a high possibility that when this bearish dynamic pushes below the trend line, there's a high possibility of a huge bearish continuation into this direction. Also, when looking at the local time frame perspectives, the local time frame perspectives are also forming some very crucial, interesting dynamics to consider for the whole global and local big picture, and to put this into the perspective, because the silver futures actually form this consolidation phase with testing this main 22.5 area several times. And within this area, the silver futures price also forms this main channel formation in which it is actually consolidating several times. And the more often this main lower boundary of this potential bear flag formation is penetrated and the breakdown below this channel formation actually happens, this means that this will actually execute this main bearish wave count, ABC wave count to the downside. And from there on, the silver futures price will actually continue heavily bearishly into the lower directions and complete this main extension of the wave C within this whole dynamic. Therefore, these are really, really important dynamics going on here. Besides that, when looking on the main global perspective and the big picture perspective, to consider all these underlying price action dynamics and all these important dynamics going on with silver. Once this breakdown below this major ascending trend line, below the lower boundary of this bear flag formation, has been broken to the downside, this means that silver futures will activate the next bearish pressure step into the lower directions, and it will activate the completion of this gigantic bear flag formation into the bearish direction. And this means that from there on, the silver price is likely to accelerate heavily bearish pressure into the lower directions, especially considering the market cap of silver, because the market cap is much lower than the one of gold. This can actually put much more pressure on the silver price, especially from a volatility perspective. This can accelerate the volatility heavily for silver as the market cap is much lower. And when considering this whole dynamic, the silver price is also forming this huge ABC pattern with the wave A already completed. And once this whole bear flag formation has been completed, the whole wave B also will also be completed. And once this breakdown below the lower boundary happened, this will accelerate heavy bearish pressures into this direction. And then it will be important how the silver price actually moves into the final target zones, because there are several important target zones. The first target zone is within the 20.5 area. The second important target zone is within the 18.5 area. The third important target zone is within the 15.5 area. And these are the main important target zones to consider here for the silver. And it will be important how silver actually moves into these zones, because if silver should increase heavy bearish pressure when moving into these zones, and the stronger the bearish pressure gets, the higher is the likelihood possibility that silver actually will continue with a huge bearish pressure into these dynamics. Also, when considering the bond market, if the bond market should show further strength within the next times, showing up with higher highs within the next times, rising further within the next times, this will put a bearish pressure on silver futures. Also, the similar dynamic holds true for the DXI, the US Dollar Currency Index, because if the DXI should rise further within the next times and show up with major bullish developments, this will also put bearish pressure on the actual silver futures price. And in this case, this main bear flag formation development on the global perspective should not be underestimated in any cases. And therefore, it will be a very important development within the next times. And this is why we keep silver in our data dashboard watch list and keep on following these dynamics, especially when considering this completion of this wall formation. The wall interface could change again, and therefore the main data analytics of the bonds market and the DXI are also really important to consider here. And with this being said, it will be great when you support my project further with a like, follow, and comment to support further important, valuable market insights. With this being said, have a good day. Bye bye.